So let me get straight away into creating an assignment. So I have a course page set up here. I have turned the editing on, and I can choose from this variety of different sections where I want to put in my assignment. I'll just choose the very first section at the top. I'll click on add an activity or resource. And the first thing that pops up is the assignment. So I'm going to go ahead and add it. And I will give it a name, and it is a must. So it's a definite requirement. You see this red asterisk here, so you can't do away without giving this thing a name. So that's a test assignment. So let me just show you some important settings that would be useful when you're setting up this assignment. So timing and availability is one important feature. So if you click on these checkboxes here, it will allow you to set a due date, a cutoff date. So a due date is like a soft deadline, and a cutoff date is like a hard deadline. So the students would not be able to submit anything after the cutoff date. You can allow students to start viewing the assignment from a given date and time, and all of these you can set it up here. The next thing I wanted to show you was the group submission settings. So a lot of times instructors have different assignments where they don't want each individual student to submit an assignment. They rather want them to work in groups and submit one single assignment for the entire group. And for that purpose, you would basically simply click on yes to have students submit in groups. Now, when we click on yes, a number of other options pop up. And one of the important options down here is grouping for students. Now, a grouping, it's really important for you to specify what grouping you would use for this assignment. And I'll just talk a bit about groupings and groups at a later stage. Just keep in mind that when you're using group submissions, groupings and groups are important. So we'll talk more about that later down this workshop. And now the other important option here is the grade option. So, well, there are so many different options that you could explore at your own pace. Andy, probably if you could just simply drop in the link for quizzes for the assignment reference that we have on our help center. You can explore these different settings at your own pace. I'm just going to go by and look at the most important and salient features. So the other important feature is the grading method. So we'll see what simple direct grading means. And we'll also look at the other two options, which is a grading guide and a rubric. So grading guide and a rubric are those different features that will really help you when you're grading assignments and you want to have a set criteria of how, or you want to want to make the process of grading students uniform across all different TAs. So that's when you would probably use a grading guide or a rubric. And the other thing is that I think is really useful is the grading workflow. At the moment, I've just set it to no, but I'll show you another assignment where I have actually set up the grading workflow to yes, and I'll show you when you would want to use a grading workflow. So just as an introduction to grading workflow, this is a feature that you would use when you have a lot of other TAs in your class as an instructor, and you want to review the grading that your TAs have done before you actually release the grades and the feedback to students. So a grading workflow is a nice way to coordinate between TAs and instructors. And I'll talk a bit more about that a little later. So let me move to another aspect of assignment, which is once the students have already submitted the assignment, you would want to see how you will go ahead and grade it, right? So I have set up an assignment here. I've got 3 students who have already submitted an assignment. I'll click on View All Submissions. And in this new page, I can see different students who have submitted these 3 different files as a submission. I'll just click on Grade to grade Joe Gaucho's files. And I would see that there is a document that Joe Gaucho has submitted, and I can see it, I can read it, And in this grading interface, I can also make comments using this comment tool. Sorry, this is the comment tool. This is the sticky note tool. These are the different annotations. Like you can put in like highlight something, put in a cross or a checkbox. You can, just basically write something here, make some marks. So all these different standard features that you would see in any PDF reader, you would find that here on the grading interface as well. On the other side, on this side of the panel, you'll see a place where you can input the grade. So you put the grade out of 100. Here's an assignment, which I was talking about the grading workflow. I'll talk about that in a minute. But here's the place where you would basically add feedback. So you can add feedback and comments here inline using the comments tool, but you could also add comments and feedback into this big box, which is basically a general feedback, a place for you to add general feedback. The grading workflow, let me just show you what are the different workflow states. So you can have the assignment in grading, as grading completed, in review, ready for release, and then released. So these are the different states. So when you as an instructor are looking at different assignments that are being graded by your teaching assistants, you would want them to basically set them as grading completed, or yes, that's the state you would want them to put in, so that you can go in and check whether the grading that the TA has done is something that you're okay with. And when you're looking at those, you would set that in review. And once you think that all the gradings have been finalized, that's when you would basically set it for ready for release or released. So these are the different workflow states, especially when you have a large cohort of TAs working together. This might simplify the process of grading. The other thing that I wanted to show you was setting grading workflow, not just here individually. So I've just shown you how to change the grading workflow state here for Joe Gaucho's assignment, but you could also do like a mass change of grading workflow states. If you just simply select all the assignments or just specific assignments, you can change the grading workflow state by clicking on Set Grading Workflow State. If you have any questions about grading workflow or any of the other things, we'll still have time for Q&A, so just hold on to your questions, or feel free to type it into the chat. We'll go into those once we are done with this main recorded session. So moving on to another way of working with assignments is to use rubrics. This basically helps with making the process of grading more uniform across all different teaching assistants. So if I click on this assignment that Sarah has submitted, what I would see is that I have a rubric which is configured here. So I have 3 criteria that I've set up for a rubric. So I'm evaluating students based on the strength of their central argument, on the structure of the essay, and on the supporting evidence for the argument. So these are the 3 main criteria, and obviously you can have more than 3. You can set up your own rubric, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But this is basically all the different levels that you can set. So if a person can do better, you set 2 points, fair is 3 points, and if the strength of the certain argument is strong, you give 4 points. In similar way, these are the different criteria and different levels. You simply click on them, and students have 10 points. So 4 plus 2 plus 2 is basically 8. So you don't have to do a manual calculation. The GauchoSpace would do it for you. So the student automatically gets 8 out of 10. You simply click on Save and Show Next. So that will save the points for the student, and we'll move on to the next student for grading. The other thing is using a grading guide. So I've set up another assignment which uses a grading guide, and a grading guide is a slightly different version of a rubric. In a grading guide, it is possible for you to give a more finer grade than a rubric. So in a rubric, we just saw that there are 3 levels, right? A person gets either 2, 3, or 4 points, and that's it. In a rubric, in a grading guide, however, we have the same 3 criteria as we had in the rubric. Strength of the central argument, structure of the essay, and substantiating the argument. We have the same 3 criteria, but now you can give them a more finer grade. So for example, if I want to give this person a 3.5 out of 4, I can give them a finer grade. So these are the different ways in which you can use those advanced grading methods. And let me just quickly show you how you can set that up. So let me go to an assignment, and under the assignment setting, you will see this option, which is called advanced grading. If you click advanced grading, you have the option to click on either create a new grading guide or a new rubric. So you can choose whether you want to create a rubric. Yeah, I'll just request everyone, if you just joined in, just mute yourself. In the meantime, we'll open the floor up for Q&A. So yeah, here's the place where you can use advanced grading so that you can, basically create a grading guide or a rubric and from scratch, or you can also use a previously defined grading guide. If you already used one before in a different assignment, you can simply use this option to publish the form as a new template. Okay, so moving on to the other section about grading assignments. What I would like to show you is the way in which you could download assignment files to your computer. So I'm going to click on view all submissions for this assignment. So I have 3 students who have basically submitted 3 different files. What I really want to do is I don't want to use GauchoSpace. I want to use something like Microsoft Word or like a PDF reader, or Adobe Acrobat or something, so that I can make changes, provide feedback, like make inline annotations or whatever. So to download all of these files together, this is something that you would choose in this grading action drop-down menu. We'll click on Snappy, which would basically download all the submission files. So once I click there, you see here, all the submissions are downloaded in a zip folder. Let me see if I have that open in my, let me share this desktop. Okay. All right. So here I have downloaded the folder. Can you guys just confirm if you're seeing my screen? Andy, can you see? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes. So I've just downloaded this folder. This is a zip file, and I'm just going to unzip it, and it'll come up as a folder. Within this folder, you see that there's a folder for each individual student. So Joe Gaucho's assignment is in this folder. And similarly, Paul and Sarah also have their assignments in their own respective folders. So you want to make sure that you keep this folder structure intact and don't mess with it. And that's really important. So once you go into Joe Gaucho's assignment, you can open this up on your computer, make those changes, and just save it exactly where it is. Don't mess with the folder structure. Now, once you've made those changes, you can zip this folder back in using compress option. And I've already compressed this thing here into a zip folder. So I'm going to go back to GauchoSpace and show you how, by basically uploading, you can, so the way in which you could basically upload all the feedback files is using this option, which is upload multiple feedback files. Once you've made all the changes, once you have given the feedback, saved it, zipped it, you need to upload the file back up again. So choose the file. The file that I've already created here is this zip folder with changes. I'm going to open it, and I'm just going to upload it. So import feedback files. I'm just going to confirm. And it says it's uploaded 3 feedback files. I'll click on continue. And now you can see that all the 3 students have their feedback files uploaded here. So this is the way in which you can upload and download feedback files. One last thing I wanted to mention was using group submissions. So the way you would, I was talking to you earlier about how to have students submit in groups. And for that particular purpose, it's really important for you to have groups in the first place. So usually when you have a larger class, you would have groups by default. And those groups are based on different sections. So each section would have a group of its own. But here I've simply created, since I don't have sections in this class, I've simply created groups. And I want people, like for example, Anne and Joe, to be working together in a group, and I want them to submit an assignment. Similarly, I want Paul and maybe someone else. I just don't have that person at the moment in the group. But basically, I've created these 3 groups, A, B, and C, and I want students in each of these 3 groups to be working together on a particular assignment. So what I would want is basically have all these 3 groups in a grouping. So the way I would define that is to go to this groupings tab, and I've already created a grouping, but once you're here, you can just simply click on create grouping. It'll ask you for a name, and it'll ask you for the groups that you want to put them in here. But since I've already created the grouping, I'm not going to create another one. So this is assignment 1 groups, and that's the name of the grouping. How is this grouping going to be useful? So just let's go back to our assignment that we were creating earlier. Remember this test assignment that we're creating, right? Let's go back here. We set students submit in groups to yes, and we wanted students of this particular grouping, assignment 1 groups, only this particular grouping, to be able to submit assignments in groups. And so you want to click on that, make sure that you've selected the right grouping, and click on Save and Display. So that way it will create a new assignment with all these different settings, and you would see it on your main homepage. Now, finally, one last thing that I wanted to mention before I turn the floor over to Andy, who's going to talk more about the quizzes. The one last thing that I wanted to mention was this description field. So usually when instructors set up an assignment, they have like a start date, which is the date on which the assignment becomes accessible to students. And then we have a due date, and there's a cutoff date. But for example, this assignment starts or is actually accessible on 8th of September. But what if I want students to be able to know what kind of things they're going to expect in the assignment, like what's the prompt, or like how much time they need to spend on this assignment, or how many words they need to put in the assignment? I'll probably write all the different details of the assignment prompt here in this description. So even though the assignment link itself does not become available until 8th of September, students can still access the description, which is displayed here on this particular, or the description that you basically put in this box. So this is something that you would do, especially when you want your students to know in advance what's going to be in the assignment. If there are any other further questions regarding assignments, we'll entertain them. But for the time being, I'm going to yield the floor to Andy, who will take us to
just real quick on that note of the description. And this is actually a nice segue into talking about quizzes, because the assignment function can be used to facilitate something sort of like a Blue Book exam or an essay exam. So in situations where you don't want your students to see the description until the beginning of the window where they can submit, and to simulate more of an exam style environment, you'd want to click that little display description on course page. There's an always display description, yeah. Actually, if you scroll down, I think there's a setting for that, right? Yeah, always show description under availability. That'll determine whether they will see the description before the allow submissions from date. But so like I said, that's a nice segue into talking more about exams and applications that you might use the quiz for. So I'm gonna share my screen. And let's take us back to our homepage. So briefly, I'll just show you how to create a quiz, which will look very familiar. It's exactly like creating the assignment, as Maharshi showed you. Click Add an Activity or Resource and scroll down to find Quiz. Click Add. Like the assignment, you'll have to give it a name. And there are a number of different settings that you have control over on this page. This is not where you'll build the quiz itself, but where you'll specify some important things about it. And I want to highlight a couple different things. And there are lots of different options for the quiz in general. It's made to facilitate many different styles of exams and different scenarios. So I'm going to go kind of quick since there's a lot to cover in that regard, but please do come back to things in the Q&A if anything isn't clear, or let me know. The first section that's important is the timing question. Much like the assignments, you can enable an open and close date and time for the quiz when students are able to log on and attempt it. And unlike the assignment, though, there's also a time limit setting here. So how much time they'll be allotted once they start the quiz. An important best practice is to make sure that there is a little bit of a grace period, or rather that there's a little bit of more time allowed in the difference between the open and closed times than the time limit is. So in other words, if you have a time limit of 1 hour, make sure there's a little bit more than 1 hour between your open the quiz time and the close the quiz time, just to give students, make sure that they have the chance to use their entire time limit, and also to decrease server load so that not all of the quizzes are being accessed and submitted at exactly the same time. This is especially important with much larger classes. And as a side note, that's also one reason that we, if possible, to use the assignment feature for your exam, for like a take-home essay exam, we suggest using that instead because of those server issues. But there are many instances where that's not feasible, so that's what we'll talk about here. When time expires, dictates what will happen with attempts if people run out of time and they've entered some answers for some of the questions. The default is for attempts to be submitted automatically. So attempts that are in progress but not complete will be submitted as they are when time expires. There are a couple more punitive offers, options, including attempts must be submitted before time expires or they're not counted. Most people just tend to keep that as the default. A couple other things that I want to highlight. There are some options for pagination, so what the quiz will look like in terms of how many questions are on each page. The shuffle within questions option is for things like multiple choice questions, whether you want the answers to appear in a different order for each different student's attempt. That is something that you might want to think about if you're worried, if you want to make it a little bit more difficult for students to cheat on an exam. There's a corresponding setting for this with the questions themselves that I'll show you, where each of them have to be set to yes for the answers to be shuffled. Review options, I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but this is basically all of these little check marks show what kind of information about the quiz, the answers, their attempts, students see at different points in the quiz relative to their attempt. So while they're taking the quiz, immediately after, after if they come back to the quiz while it's still open, or after the quiz is closed and nobody can take the quiz anymore. And those are left to the discretion of the instructor as well for how high stakes you want the quiz to be and what information you want to be, you know, relatively publicly available during while the quiz is open. Some other things I will mostly, I think, skip ahead to creating your quiz. So once we click Save Changes at the bottom, we've theoretically created a quiz, but it's empty. You see this no questions have been added yet. So this is where you'll have to actually build your quiz by clicking the Edit Quiz button, which takes you to this different sort of settings page where you can add questions to your quiz. And you do so by clicking this little Add button here. And if you click that, you'll notice that you have 3 different options for adding a question. And I'll go over each of them at different points, but the most basic one is just to add a brand new question that basically you're building your quiz from the ground up. And if we click that, you'll see that there are quite a few different types of questions at your disposal. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these at all, but I want to generally say that there are sort of 2 general types of quizzes or exams that the quiz can function for. They're manually graded quizzes, so things like essay exams, or auto-graded quizzes, things more like multiple choice and matching. So if we clicked multiple choice to create a multiple choice question, this is what it looks like. We have, this loads, an option for a question name. This is sort of just a shorthand for you to remember what the question is without looking at the text of the question itself. I can just say Q1 or something like that. The question text itself is the question. So in a multiple choice, you would write the text of your question here. And if we scroll down, you'll see this is that shuffle choices setting that I was referring to earlier. Both this and the previous setting in the overall quiz settings have to be checked for answers to be shuffled. So you don't want to check this if the order of your choices matters. For instance, if you have something like both A and C are correct, that will not be usable if A and C are different in every single attempt. So what you do is you'll enter the possible choices for your multiple choice exam or question in these different options here. And under grade, you'll determine how much credit is awarded for each of those answers. So usually you're going to set one of them to 100 and keep the rest of your choices to none. You can have as few as 2 choices and pretty much as many choices as you want beyond that. So that's generally, every editor like this will look a little bit different depending on what type of question you're making, but that's sort of what it looks like on the instructor's end for creating questions. So if we take a look at an example of an auto-graded quiz, so things that makes use of questions like multiple choice and matching. We have a 3-question quiz here that has 2 multiple choice questions and 1 matching question. So if we click preview, we can see what that looks like for the students. This is what they'll see. They'll enter their answers here. This is what the matching type question looks like. And so this will automatically generate a score for them based on their results and the grades that you define for each of those answers. So that's nice on the instructor's end. The work is mostly upfront. The grading takes care of itself. That said, you don't necessarily relinquish control of the grading completely once the grades are in. You can amend things afterwards. If we look at this results tab here, this will take us to a view of how people did on the exam, what questions they got right. If we review Joe Gaucho's attempt here, we see that he was not awarded credit for this first question for his answer of, on second thought, this is also the correct answer. And maybe we decide that we actually want to give credit for this answer and that we shorted Joe on this particular attempt. We can do that by simply going back to the edit quiz page and clicking this little gear icon, which will take us back to the settings page for that particular question. And if we scroll down, you can find the choice that we want to change and change it from none to 100%. You can also award partial credit by selecting any of those different percentage point options. If we click Save Changes, those changes won't be made automatically. We'll have to return to the results section and click Regrade All. If we do that and click Continue, we will notice that now Joe Gaucho has credit for that question and has full credit for the quiz. Normally it'll show you a little slash through the score here to indicate that the change has been made. It's not showing that because I've now done this twice to demonstrate the same thing on this particular quiz. But normally that's what will appear there. So that's an overview of how you might use the quiz feature for an auto-graded quiz. For an essay type quiz that involves manual grading is basically you're grading some kind of written response. And so for this example quiz, there are two types of essay questions available to you. One of them actually is automatically graded, and if we take a look at that, the settings for that, we recommend only using this auto-graded essay type for things that are low stakes, mainly if you want to award credit just for somebody responding to a prompt without actually reading their response. You can set some parameters for how it's graded, like expected number of words or percentage of the grade awarded if certain target phrases are used, if keywords are used in the response. There are a lot of different options here, but if you need a more fine-grained analysis of their responses, ultimately you're going to want to use the essay question, which you'll have to grade manually. And that will, for the students, a quiz like this will just look like this, where they'll have a text editor to record their responses. One of these would be graded automatically according to that criteria that we set, and one of them would have to be graded manually. So to get to the manual grading page, we click this results tab again. And you'll notice that this option here for manual grading has been revealed. And if we click that, we have our manual graded essay question here, and we can click Grade All. And this will take us to all the responses for this particular question. We can offer feedback, comments, and enter the number of points for this particular response. So that is an overview of how you might use the quiz for an essay response. Another thing that I wanted to highlight that you might want to use is the question bank, which is important for the architecture of some quizzes. I'm sorry about the yard work in the background if you can hear that. Hopefully it's not too bad. So the question bank is a way of creating questions or storing questions for your quizzes that are not particular to a specific quiz or that might be used on different quizzes in the future. If we click this question bank tab down here and click create a new question, this is going to offer the same menu of different question types and allow us to create a question, but that's not assigning that question to a particular quiz. It's just generating one for later use. We can also keep our questions organized in different categories with this tab down here. I've, in this example, set up categories for different question types so that we might be able to draw from those. You might have different topical categories that you make categories for. You can add a category at the bottom of this page here. And if we return to this edit quiz page, I'll have to do it in one that doesn't have attempts. You'll see we can add question from the question bank. So we can select a question straight from one of those categories that we set up and simply check this box and click add selected questions to the quiz. Another option here is add a random question. This is a good option if you have a pretty robust, large question bank. Let's say you have like a 60 question bank and you want to have a 10 question quiz with 10 questions that are randomly drawn from those 60. You can click add a random question, select the category that you want, and indicate the number of random questions that you want to draw for your quiz there. So those are the basic ways of setting up or adding questions to build a quiz. One thing that I want to go over before we open it up to Q&A is a couple different drawbacks or pitfalls in creating a quiz. And the first important one is the relationship between this maximum grade setting and the number of points for each quiz. So if you'll see right now, we have this quiz set to 10 points maximum grade, and there's only one question and it's worth 1 point. If a student were to take this quiz and get 1 point for this question, their grade would be 10 out of 10. It automatically rescales their point value for these questions to be a grade out of this point value. This is an important point because oftentimes instructors will want to make like a 10-point quiz with 30 questions where you have 30 questions to get your 10 points and 31-point questions. That won't actually work the way that many instructors think that it will, because if you get 30 out of 30, and that will be rescaled to 10 out of 10, but likewise, a 5 out of 30 will be rescaled to be a grade out of 10. So it stays proportional. And another related issue is that there's no way to designate a quiz question as extra credit. So a lot of times within a quiz, instructors will want to have maybe 5 questions and 2 extra credit questions. There's no easy way to do that within the quiz itself because you can't designate an extra credit question. We have a recommended workaround that's not the most elegant thing in the world, but it does get the job done for this. It involves separating the quiz out between the core questions and the extra credit questions. So I'll show you an example. If this is actually this is the wrong one. Let me go to the correct one. This is our core quiz. And we look at the questions. You'll notice we have 2 questions here, but one of them doesn't have a point value associated with it. The way that we add that question is we select this particular question type description, which is not actually a question, but just a way of adding some text onto the interface when someone attempts a quiz. What that looks like in practice is this. See if this preview loads. So this is what that that description question that I made that doesn't have any points with it associated with it has. And what I've done is I've added a link to a second quiz, which is our extra credit quiz. And it looks pretty much exactly the same. It's got a question, one question in here. You'll see it's not set to extra credit. I'll show you how to make this functionally extra credit in a second. One important setting for this that you want to do is under common module settings, you want to set the availability to make available but not shown on course page. So in other words, students can access it if they have the URL, but there's no link to it from the course page. So basically in practice, they will only get to it by clicking the link provided in the other quiz. So to make this clear how this works in practice, we need to look at the gradebook, because the gradebook area is where we can actually assign extra credit. So we see under our quizzes category, I have this nested category for our extra credit quiz. So I have the base quiz here within that category and the extra credit quiz, which is set to extra credit, which you can do in the edit settings section here. So functionally what they'll get is a grade for this category that's composed of their score on this quiz and the extra credit from their score on this other quiz. So like I said, not necessarily the most elegant way of doing things, but it does solve that issue. You can do a similar thing if you have an essay question where you want to have multiple possible prompts for students to respond to. You could use that description to list the possible prompts and have simply one essay question where they respond to any of the prompts. Other than that, I think that was the most important pitfall that I wanted to cover. So I will leave it there for quizzes, and perhaps, Maharshi, we can stop the recording and open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add a couple of things before we end the session. One was that we could, I'm just going to send you a link on how to, it's a link on to a Help Center article on how to create a quiz questions or a multiple choice quiz questions in Word. And there's a way for you to basically directly upload those quiz questions onto GauchoSpace. So I'm just going to paste you, link you to that help article here. And I'm also going to link you to another help article, which is on override. So a lot of times instructors, when using both quizzes and assignments, when they have, they want to give select students, especially DSP students or students with special requirements, a set amount of additional time or some different due date or different amount of time restrictions, you can always create user overrides without necessarily creating another quiz separately. So within the same quiz, you can have separate timings for different set of students or individual students. And the way you would do that is by using user override. So I'm just going to link you to that article, which I've just pasted into chat. And yes, I'm going to stop the recording and then we would entertain questions